So as far as detecting the circular references, we did see that screenshot before, which does pop up as soon as you have a circular reference. But if we wanted to look a little bit more in depth at options that we have inside Creo, there is the reference viewer. If you've not ever used that before, it's good not only in situations where you're using circular references, it's also very good at determining like the reference structure and the parent-child relationships that are existing in your model, because sometimes if you need to make a change, you might need to predict about what's going to happen and what's related and so forth. So very, very good tool. If you're not familiar with it, certainly something maybe as a task after this to go away and have a look at. Model check, it's another thing that people aren't necessarily familiar with, those of you with Windchill or those of you that are trying to sort of more access or sort of add some control to your designs so that the parts and so forth must adhere to a particular standard can be used. There is a check inside model check that can determine whether or not there's a circular reference in a model. And I've included a screenshot there. There is a somewhat what's called gatekeeper, I believe. I think it's still called that inside Windchill, when model check basically checks files coming into Windchill for a set of criteria, and if they match, for example, it's got a circular reference in it, you can't check in. So it's a great idea because circular references are bad. You know, real bad, and can cause various issues. Sometimes they're not a major issue, but in most cases, you know, they are. And if there is a circular reference, it's certainly something you do want to resolve. Okay. So preventing that from getting into Windchill is great because, like, if you're the person that's caused a circular reference, you're the best person to resolve it. You might have just done something and it's caused a circular reference, and maybe you haven't been trained, maybe you don't understand what it is, but then you try and check in the model and it's not letting you, and then you're forced to understand this now. So it's a really great, great tool. All right, so how do we prevent circular references? Okay. Inside part models themselves, like just a part in its own environment, it's really impossible to create a circular reference. The circular references are something that really exist at the assembly level, right? But some things that we do in the part environment, and also if we're working like in a sort of somewhat top-down design approach whereby we're modifying features in a part from the assembly level, we should be very careful about this, because that's where we can start to cause these sorts of problems. But we can, in a part file, you know, I'll show you in a moment a little bit, we can in a part file generate some behavior where a model, if we regenerate it, is never able to actually regenerate fully because of something that we've done. So we'll have a look at that. But yeah, certainly these are some options you can use. If you're not familiar with it, I mean, yeah, it's sort of a general best practice inside Creo when you're assembling items, that you would try and use any of the default datums, so datum planes, axis or coordinate systems. And the reason for that is because those features occur early on in the model tree, and realistically they never change. So no matter what is added after them, whether it's certain geometry, sketches, you know, solid surfaces, doesn't really matter. Those planes, those geometry are still going to be there. So that will make your assembly more robust. Avoid referencing edges and faces. So that's sort of also a general sort of rule. Try and, where you can, if you have a choice between an edge and a surface, or a coordinate system to determine a direction for some other feature that you're doing, then certainly do that. Okay. Sketch constraints internal. Okay. So what that means is if you've got a part and you've got a sketch and that sketch exists within the part, then what you should be doing is any references that you then make for further sketches or inside that sketch should be within the part that you're actually working on. Now, this is in Creo very easy to work around because at the assembly level, we can activate a part and we can simply, you know, go edit definition on a sketch, and then we can actually reference anything else that's already in the assembly in the background. Okay. Please don't do that ever. Okay. The best way to work with a sketch, if you're in a part file, is to open up the part file. Don't try and save maybe 1 or 2 clicks by activating it in the assembly. Please open it up and work with it. And then if you're only got the part visible, you can only reference things inside the part. Okay. Intent references is certainly important, intent edges and intent surfaces and things like that. That's a selection technique, perhaps something to note down and have a look at, but certainly the idea of selecting those sorts of things, again, is it because it makes things much more robust for future changes. All right. So inside of an assembly, depends on how you define your constraints and so forth, and there used to be some config options that would get you around certain things here, that you could constrain A to B, then B to A. Not really ideal. Yeah, look, this I guess I'll just take a sidestep for a moment. This sort of webinar is sort of the second in a series of 3. The next one we're going to do is talk about like the real proper way to do things. For now, we're trying just to identify that the issues occur and what we can do in the meantime to sort of work to sort of understand what they are. Okay, so things like skeleton models and component to component loops and things like that are important as well. All right. Okay, so for those of you out there that might have ever experienced a circular reference or created one, what happens in Creo is you get, as soon as you create it, it actually generates a text file called a CRC file. It's a text file with a CRC extension on it. And what it does is it gives you this information here. Now, what this is obviously it's basically just text that we have, but it has the feature number, the feature ID, it tells us the model that it's in, and then it refers to this, and then it refers to this. The basic point that don't worry about the detail for now, but the basic point I want to show you is, I guess, the first feature that we see there is also the last feature. So it's like A is referring to B, which is referring to C, which is referring to A. Okay, and we could be up, you know, it depends on the depth. In this case, it says the depth of the loop is 4. But this could be much more complex than that. Also, in this particular case, there's only one circular reference found. That's probably pretty easy to resolve. I've seen circumstances where we have 20 or 30 circular references in models, and that is a much of a challenge to resolve. So certainly, I guess I'd just perhaps re-stress again, if you ever create a circular reference, please immediately remove it. Even if it's just undo what you just did and then have a think about things, yeah, please do that. Okay, but in order to break this loop, in reality, if A is referring to B is referring to C is referring to A, we just need to cut out one of these references, okay, somewhere. So there's a link between there and there and there. We can look at those and we can determine which way is the best way to go for us. If we have to go back at this, we can get all the information, figure out which feature it is, so on and so forth. There is another way to look at this with inside Creo too, which I will show you in a moment. Yeah, look, I mean, it does here say replace with stable features. So if you figure out that I don't know what to do, a realistic option here would be to try and delete either this feature or this feature, maybe, or any of them really, and see then what happens if you do that, okay, and then add something back in. Just need to be careful there though, because sometimes even if you delete a part or out of an assembly, there's still going to be a feature within that part that's got some external reference. So really, just I guess try and understand what you've got before you go and just try and quickly solve it. Okay. After you're done, of course, if you've solved the loop, then you'll no longer get a result in Creo telling you that you've got something that you need to resolve. Okay, so there's no message in Creo.